What happens when a police sergeant with a power complex pulls over a high-ranking army officer and tries to intimidate her? He thinks it's just another traffic stop until she hits record. What follows is a takedown so quiet, it shook an entire department. It was late on a quiet Wednesday night in Toledo, Ohio, just after 11 p.m., the kind of hour when the city seems to exhale. Most of the restaurants were closed, the sidewalks empty, and the roads stretched long and quiet, interrupted only by the occasional shift worker heading home or a distant hum of a late-night delivery truck. The air was still, save for the rhythmic sweep of streetlights casting soft yellow glows across empty intersections. Lieutenant Colonel Adrian Wallace was behind the wheel of her government-issued black SUV, heading north toward home. The vehicle wasn't flashy, matte finish, lightly tinted windows, clean and unadorned. It moved with the same quiet precision as its driver. Adrian was a woman shaped by 22 years in uniform, composed, calm, and clear-eyed. She left a base meeting just outside Indianapolis 2 hours earlier, her thoughts now winding down with the road. With her hand steady on the wheel and her foot pressing a constant 55, she was already mentally unpacking tomorrow's tasks. She wasn't in a rush, just ready to be home. As she passed under an overpass, a pair of headlights glinted from the shadows just off Reynolds Road. Parked in a habitual hiding spot sat Sergeant Daniel Mercer's cruiser, angled to catch passing traffic. The engine was off, the cabin dim. Mercer sat behind the wheel, bored and restless, half watching the road while scrolling through his phone. The night had been uneventful, no calls, no movement. 15 years of policing had dulled the excitement he once felt for the job. Now it was mostly about maintaining order, writing reports, and waiting. Then he saw it, an unfamiliar black SUV, gliding through the night like it didn't belong. No flashy plates, no bumper stickers. Government vehicle or not, Mercer didn't like what he didn't recognize. He tossed his half-drunk coffee onto the passenger seat, flicked on the ignition, and pulled out. The red and blue lights flashed in Adrienne's rear view before she even realized he'd been behind her. Her instincts took over. She signaled, slowed, and eased the SUV onto the shoulder with a smoothness that spoke of training. Her heart didn't race. Her hands didn't shake. She'd been through far worse and far more dangerous places. Still, her mind sharpened. She didn't know what this was yet, but she knew how to manage it. The cruiser door slammed behind her. She watched in the side mirror as a tall white man approached, early 40s, stocky build, hand already resting on his holster. His flashlight beam bounced across her rear window, then cut straight into her face as he stopped by the driver's side. "License and registration," he barked. No introduction, no explanation. Adrian rolled the window halfway. "Officer," she said evenly, "may I ask why I'm being stopped?" The flashlight beam didn't budge. He didn't lower his voice. "You were drifting between lanes. No signal. Looked like you might be under the influence." Her brow arched. She hadn't drifted. She hadn't swerved. She hadn't even touched her phone. But she didn't argue. She kept her hands visible, moved slowly, deliberately, deliberate enough for the dash cam to catch every movement as she reached into the glove compartment. She handed over her license and ID. "This is a government vehicle. I'm a federal employee." Mercer glanced at the badge. "Military?" he asked, squinting with a smirk. "Yes. Doesn't mean you're above the law," he said. "I never said I was." But something shifted in his tone then, as if her calm irritated him, like her not flinching was an insult. His posture straightened. His voice rose. "Step out of the vehicle for me." Adrienne's jaw tensed, but her voice stayed even. "Excuse me." "I said step out. I'm conducting a sobriety check." "On what grounds?" she asked. "I've complied. I haven't been drinking. I'd like to know the reason." Mercer stepped closer, looming now. "You refusing a lawful order?" "No," she said. "I'm asking for clarification." That was all it took. Mercer reached for her door and pulled it open himself. His stance was aggressive now, his hand still hovering near his weapon. Adrian didn't flinch. Instead, she reached down, tapped the screen of her phone, and began recording. "Just so we're clear," she said softly. "This interaction is being documented." The flashlight shifted slightly. Mercer's eyes darted to the phone for just a second. A beat of hesitation passed between them, but it wasn't enough to stop him. "Out of the car," he snapped again. Adrian stepped out, shoulders straight, chin level, eyes forward. Not confrontational, just unshakable. She followed his instructions exactly. Under the orange hue of a nearby street lamp, she walked the white line. No sway, no stumble, no hesitation. She passed every test. Still, he wrote her a citation. Failure to maintain lane. Adrian took it without a word. Just a long, steady look. Then she got back into her SUV and drove off into the dark, her phone still recording. What Mercer didn't realize, what his years of unchecked authority had failed to prepare him for, was that he'd just pulled over the wrong person, and the consequences were already in motion. Sergeant Daniel Mercer returned to the station around 1 a.m., adrenaline fading into the hollow tiredness that follows a minor confrontation. The lobby's fluorescent lights buzzed softly as he logged his stop in the computer system. Simple, he told himself. Traffic violation, sobriety check, citation issued. The report took less than 10 minutes. He slipped his body cam into its dock, the green LED blinking to tell him the footage was uploading to the server, a routine he'd performed thousands of times without a second thought. He headed for the break room, craving caffeine more than conversation. Officer Gina Diaz was already there rummaging for sugar packets. "Slow night?" she asked. Mercer snorted, pulled over some Fed lady who tried to pull rank, showed me her little ID like it was the golden ticket. He mimed a salute and smirked. Diaz raised an eyebrow. "Fed as in military?" Mercer shrugged, said she was. "Doesn't matter out there." He punctuated it with a sip of burnt coffee, certain the story ended right there in that styrofoam cup. But the night shift sergeant on duty, a meticulous officer named Brennan, reviewed every video that crossed his desk. Around 4 a.m., yawning and rubbing his eyes, he clicked on Mercer's file. The footage played. Mercer's flashlight glare, the clip commands, the moment the driver calmly stated she was recording, the flawless field test, the ticket anyway. Brennan jotted a note. Potential escalation? He saved a copy on a secure drive and flagged it for internal affairs review. Sunrise cast dim orange through the precinct blinds when Captain Tom Reading arrived. A veteran of quiet politics and community meetings, Reading had a mental checklist each morning: coffee, crime stats, personnel issues. Brennan intercepted him in the hallway. "Cap, you need to see something." 10 minutes later, Reading leaned back in his chair, the video on loop. "Were there any complaints filed?" Brennan hesitated. "Not yet on our end." 8 miles away, Adrian Wallace paced her spare, tidy living room. The recording ran on her laptop screen while she dialed Fort Wayne's Judge Advocate General office. "Good morning, Colonel," the legal aide answered, surprised by the early call. Adrian described the stop with military precision: location, timestamp, officer name, actions taken. By 8 a.m., a folder containing both camera angles, GPS logs, and her written statement sat in an encrypted email to the Ohio Inspector General, with copies to Internal Affairs, her commanding general, and her personal attorney, Delaney Price. At noon, Mercer strolled in for day 2 of his shift and found a manila envelope on his desk. Formal inquiry, preliminary notice of investigation. He laughed aloud, waving it like a joke to Diaz. "They're really chasing this?" She didn't laugh. Instead, she asked quietly, "You ever Google her?" Mercer scoffed, but typed the name into the search bar. Up popped news clippings. Humanitarian missions in Haiti, a Bronze Star, keynote speaker at the State Academy. The smirk slipped. An hour later, Captain Reading summoned him. The captain's office smelled of stale paper and strong coffee. Reading folded his hands. "Dan, you're under preliminary review pending a full investigation." Mercer crossed his arms. "For what?" "I followed procedure." Reading's tone sharpened. "Did you have probable cause to pull her out? Did you run a sobriety test because she was dangerous, or because she questioned you?" Silence stretched. Reading slid a copy of Adrienne's phone video across the desk. That's what the brass, IA, and probably a federal judge will ask. I suggest you prepare. Mercer left the office with anger twisting in his gut, but for the first time in years uncertainty gnawed at him. At home that night he rewatched his own body cam, footage he'd never bothered to review. With each replay, the certainty that had shielded him for so long eroded. He'd expected obedience, and when he hadn't received it, his voice had risen, his hand had hovered. Watching himself from an outsider's lens was disquieting. 2 days later, a courier delivered a thick packet to Adrienne's doorstep. Acknowledgement of her complaint, witness forms, instructions for possible civil action. Sergeant Mercer received a mirrored packet from IA along with a notice of union representation. The wheels were turning fast, faster than most cases, because the plaintiff was not only a citizen, she was a lieutenant colonel, and her evidence was airtight. Rumor spread through the Toledo PD like spilled ink. Some officers sided with Mercer, a veteran cop getting railroaded for doing his job. Others, especially rookies who had endured his harsher lectures, whispered that maybe the reckoning was overdue. In hushed tones they recalled prior stops: a teen whose skateboard was tossed in anger, a nurse berated for questioning a speeding ticket, minor incidents dismissed as Mercer just being tough. Now those stories resurfaced, aligning like dominoes. Adrienne, meanwhile, carried on with her routine: physical training at 0600, logistics briefings, mentoring junior officers. Outwardly she was composed, but every ping of her inbox tightened a knot in her stomach. She'd filed complaints before on behalf of soldiers or civilians, but this time her own dignity was on the line. She would see it through. By the end of the week, the local news stations caught wind. Headlines scrolled: decorated Army officer files complaint against Toledo sergeant. Mercer's photograph flashed, first prideful in uniform, now beneath bold print hinting at misconduct. For the first time in his career, scrutiny. The fallout had begun, and it would only intensify. 3 weeks later, a brisk March wind whipped through downtown Toledo as reporters gathered on the courthouse steps. A single case on the civil docket had drawn them, a rarity for midday local news. Inside, the marble corridors echoed with footfalls and hushed conversation. Courtroom 2B, usually half full for slip-and-fall suits, was packed. Uniformed officers, National Guard personnel, community activists, and curious citizens jostled for seats. Adrienne Wallace arrived in full-service dress blues. Rows of ribbons glinted beneath the overhead lights. The Bronze Star, Meritorious Service Medal, unit citations. Her presence commanded attention, but she entered without fanfare, acknowledging colleagues with a silent nod. Delaney Price, her attorney, carried a slim briefcase and a stack of exhibits: body cam stills, GPS data, departmental policy manuals. Across the aisle, Mercer sat stiffly beside attorney Charles Breener, who specialized in police defense litigation. Mercer wore a gray suit that seemed to shrink under the stares of half the room. The union representative patted his shoulder, whispering last-minute advice: stay calm, answer narrowly, project authority. Mercer tried to focus on the polished seal above the bench instead of the bronze star visible just 20 feet away. Proceedings began with jury selection. 12 citizens, an insurance adjuster, retired teacher, a college student on spring break. Each swore impartiality. Breener attempted to strike a tech-savvy juror who'd voiced skepticism about police body cams, but the judge denied the request. By noon, the jury box was set, and opening statements commenced. Delaney Price stood first. She spoke without notes, her voice measured but resonant. This case is about a simple principle. Authority demands accountability. Lieutenant Colonel Wallace complied with every lawful instruction, yet she was treated as a threat, humiliated in public, and cited without cause. She paused, letting jurors absorb Adrienne's rank insignia. You will see video, hear policy experts, and reach one conclusion: Sergeant Mercer overstepped the Constitution he swore to uphold. Breener countered, pacing before the jury. Traffic stops are dynamic. Officers must make split-second decisions to keep roads safe. Sergeant Mercer acted within his training, ensuring the driver was sober before releasing her. He gestured toward the prosecution table. We respect Colonel Wallace's service, but even decorated soldiers are subject to civil law. The first witness, Officer Brennan, the supervisor who flagged Mercer's video. He outlined departmental guidelines, emphasizing that field sobriety tests require specific indicators: glassy eyes, slurred speech, odor of alcohol. Under Price's questioning, Brennan confirmed none were present and admitted the stop appeared out of scope. Then came Adrian. She squared her shoulders and took the oath. Price guided her through the night, leaving the base, steady speed, the moment she saw lights. Her delivery was clinical, almost detached, but jurors leaned forward as she described Mercer's tone, escalating without reason, and the flash of adrenaline she suppressed behind calm training. When the body cam footage played, the room was silent save for the distant hum of the air conditioning. Mercer's voice filled the speakers. License and registration. Step out, step out. Cross-examination began. Breener approached, polite but probing. Colonel, with respect, military posture can appear intimidating. Could your demeanor have made the officer feel challenged? Adrian met his gaze. Professionalism isn't intimidation. I answered every question and complied. Calm is not threat. Breener persisted. If the officer misread that calm. Adrian didn't flinch. Misreading isn't justification for violating procedure. Expert testimony followed. A retired State Patrol captain dissecting stop protocol. A civil rights professor explaining constitutional protections during detainment. Each chipped at Mercer's defense. When Mercer finally took the stand, cameras clicked. He testified to 15 years of service, countless traffic stops, the constant fear of roadside danger. I noticed her drifting, he said. It raised suspicion. Price's cross-examination pierced the narrative. Your dash cam shows no drift for over a mile. How do you explain that? Mercer hesitated. I may have observed it earlier. Price displayed a timestamp overlay, no deviation. Sergeant, did Colonel Wallace ever resist? She questioned me. Is asking for clarification resistance? It can be non-compliance. Then Price delivered the pivotal question. Had you known she was a lieutenant colonel, would you have behaved differently? Mercer exhaled. Honestly, yes. Gasps murmured through the audience. Price let silence settle before turning to the jury. And there, ladies and gentlemen, is the crux. Closing arguments crystallized narratives. Price painted a portrait of unchecked power meeting disciplined restraint. Breener invoked the perils officers face nightly and warned against Monday morning quarterbacking. The jury retired at 3 p.m. They returned the next afternoon. Foreperson, a soft-spoken librarian, stood. We find in favor of the plaintiff. The award, $35,000 in damages, and a formal declaration that Mercer violated Wallace's Fourth Amendment rights. Judge Cynthia Morales added a recommendation for departmental review and forwarded findings to the DOJ. Adrian received the verdict with a quiet nod. Mercer stared at the defense table, hands locked, jaw tight. Outside, lenses flashed. Reporters pressed. Colonel Wallace, any comment? She replied only, accountability matters. Then she stepped into the brisk wind, her lawyer beside her, leaving Mercer to shield his face from cameras, an unfamiliar role for a man once certain of his authority. 2 months later, the parade field of Fort Wayne rolled beneath a cloud-dappled Indiana sky. Early spring brought a bite to the air, but inside the Training and Readiness Center, 100 fresh recruits sat in neat rows. Their fatigues were crisp, their boots still shone. The buzz of whispered hopes, aviator slots, medevac dreams, overseas postings, filled the auditorium until the clock struck 0900 and the side door opened. Lieutenant Colonel Adrian Wallace walked in wearing OCPs, nothing flashy except the subdued rank patch on her chest and the quiet confidence that followed her. She stepped onto the low stage, set aside her water bottle, and surveyed her audience. Teenagers not yet 20, parents' pride barely a week old, prior service transfers seeking a fresh start. A few mid-career officers curious about the controversy they'd seen on the news. Good morning, she began. Voices replied in uneven unison, some too soft, others overeager. Let's try that again, good morning. This time the chorus was firm. She smiled. Better. She clicked to her first slide. A single word in bold white letters against black, leadership. You've heard this term since you signed your contracts, she said. You'll keep hearing it long after I retire. But leadership is more than giving orders. It's how you stand when no one is watching, or when everyone is. She told them about convoy delays in Kandahar, about coordinating hurricane relief in Puerto Rico. Then, without drama, she recounted January 17th on Reynolds Road. I was treated as suspicious because I asked a question, she said, voice steady. Murmurs rippled. Many had read blog headlines, but not the details. She laid them out. The flashlight in her eyes, the demand to exit, the quiet decision to record. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. Discipline isn't just for battlefields. It's for parking lots at midnight. She paused, letting silence emphasize the lesson. A recruit in the back raised a timid hand. Ma'am, did you ever feel unsafe? Adrian considered. In that moment, yes, but fear didn't control me. Training did. Another hand shot up. How did you stay calm? She smiled. Practice. Every briefing, every check ride, every formation run teaches you to breathe, assess, respond. Then she pivoted. Some will tell you a uniform earns automatic respect. They're wrong. Respect is earned by character, reinforced by consistency, protected by accountability. Click, a new slide. Power is not equal to privilege. Then a quote from former Supreme Court Justice Jackson. Authority is to be used for service, never for self-importance. Midway through, Sergeant First Class Jordan Reed, rigid, square-jawed, stood in the back. Adrian invited him forward. Reed once stopped on suspicion because his beard looked too neat for a soldier. Shared how humiliation sharpened his resolve to lead differently. His story echoed hers. Documentation, follow-up, change. The recruits listened, some wide-eyed, some scribbling notes. Adrian concluded with a challenge. In your careers you'll carry rifles, radios, tablets, maybe even drones. But the most important tool is invisible, integrity. If you misuse authority, you weaken the uniform for everyone. If you wield it responsibly, you strengthen institutions, build trust, and save lives. She stepped down amid respectful applause, not the thunderous clapping of a celebrity, but a sturdier sound, conviction taking root. Outside, she walked the perimeter of the drill field, exchanging quiet words with small clusters of soldiers. One young private, cheeks flushed, said, "Ma'am, my uncle's a cop. He thinks you ruined a good officer's career." Adrian answered gently, "Tell him I didn't ruin anything. Choices have consequences, for me and for Sergeant Mercer. Accountability protects good officers. It doesn't punish them." Back in Toledo, accountability was rolling forward. An internal review board convened weekly. Mercer had been placed on administrative leave immediately after the verdict. Now the board weighed prior complaints previously dismissed as unsubstantiated. Old traffic stop videos reemerged, each scrutinized frame by frame. A pattern appeared: raised voices, quick escalation, citations that skirted probable cause. Union lawyers negotiated potential reassignment, but public pressure mounted. Local radio hosts debated police culture. City council members demanded updated training. Citizens filled forums with stories of minor humiliations under bright red and blue lights. Officers with spotless records found themselves thanking Adrian under their breath. She'd drawn a line they no longer needed to explain. Adrian, however, accepted no applause. That evening she sat at her kitchen table, sipping tea, reading letters, some grateful, some angry. One envelope, scribbled handwriting, lacked a return address. Inside, "Thank you for showing me you can stand up without shouting." She placed it alongside commendations and press clippings, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. The message had traveled further than she'd imagined. 6 months after the verdict, autumn settled over northwest Ohio. Leaves burned orange along the Maumee River as city officials gathered in a municipal conference room for an important vote. Agenda Item 4. Adoption of revised traffic stop procedures, including mandatory de-escalation training, body cam review audits, and an accountability liaison to coordinate with the Office of the Inspector General. The proposal passed 6-1. Councilwoman Teresa Nguyen, who championed the reforms, addressed the press afterward. This ordinance began with one encounter and one recording. Transparency benefits officers and citizens alike. Reporters noted she cited Wallace versus Mercer 3 times. The case had become shorthand for the moment policy shifted from theory to action. At the Toledo Police Department, change came slower, pushed by fresh oversight. Mercer's disciplinary hearing, once postponed, finally convened. Evidence spanned a decade, 9 citizen complaints, most closed for insufficient evidence. Presented in aggregate, the pattern was undeniable. The board voted to terminate his employment, citing misconduct, violation of civil rights, and damage to public trust. Mercer appealed, but each step brought the same result. The badge he once tapped for authority was now a paperweight in a box of personal effects. Nationwide, policing forums dissected the outcome. Some decried it as a slippery slope of second-guessing officers. Others praised it as a case study in proportional accountability, evidence-based review, and the necessity of civilian oversight. Training academies added the body cam footage to curriculums under the module Escalation and Perception. Cadets watched as instructors paused on Mercer's hand near his holster, on Adrienne's calm inquiry, on the citation issued after a clean test. Discussion followed. Where did professionalism end and ego begin? Adrienne learned of Mercer's dismissal through an email forwarded by Delaney Price. She read it once, exhaled, and closed her laptop. There was no pleasure in another person's downfall, only a muted sense of closure. She had not asked for termination, merely accountability. Still, institutions choose their paths, and this was theirs. Her life pressed forward. A promotion list released that November placed her among the top selections for full colonel. The official ceremony was set for February. Around her, new responsibilities blossomed, overseeing joint logistics for flood response exercises, sitting on a Pentagon committee for gender integration policy, mentoring an RTC cadet who reminded her of herself at 20. Yet the encounter shadowed her work in small ways. At conferences, peers asked for her insight on law enforcement relations. Civil rights organizations requested keynote speeches. She accepted a few, declined many. Her time, she felt, belonged to soldiers and supply lines, to readiness briefings, to her family. Still, she wrote an op-ed for Stars and Stripes, titled Calm is a Combat Skill, arguing that restraint is as forceful a tool as any weapon. The piece circulated widely, copied into police newsletters and university ethics courses. One evening in December, Adrienne drove through Toledo on her way to a regional leadership panel. Snow flurries danced in her headlights. She passed a stretch of Reynolds Road where it all began and noticed a cruiser parked under the overpass. Different unit number, different officer. As if guided by reflex, she checked her speed and lane position perfect. The cruiser did not move. She parked at a grocery store nearby, noticing a small placard at the entrance. Community coffee with cops, first Wednesday, 6 p.m. A photo from last month's event showed 2 officers chatting with residents. One caption read, "Building bridges after difficult times." Adrienne smiled. Small steps. She lifted her collar against the cold and headed inside for bottled water before the panel, unseen and unremarkable to shoppers passing by. Across town, a young officer named Maya Silva reviewed bodycam footage from last night's stops, her own and her partner's. The new policy required them to assess each encounter, self-critique, and log notes. She paused on a clip where she'd raised her voice. The civilian had complied. Her tone hadn't needed the edge. She typed, "Next time use conversational volume. Escalate only if safety compromised." She saved the note, thinking, authority is a weight. Training had drilled that phrase, borrowed from a colonel she'd never met. A year later, a sociology professor at the University of Toledo published a study linking lower complaint rates to the new review protocols. In the acknowledgments, he referenced the Wallace effect. Scholars debated correlation versus causation, but the numbers trended positive. Less escalation, fewer citations overturned, more community participation in oversight meetings. Adrian caught wind of the study while traveling and paused to read it in a crowded airport terminal. She closed the article, leaned back, and watched strangers hurry past TSA checkpoints. Most would never know her name, never know that a quiet roadside encounter fed into their city's evolving relationship with law enforcement. She was fine with that. Leadership, she'd learned, was rarely about headlines. It was about ripple effects, slow, sometimes invisible, but undeniably real. Before boarding, she opened her phone's photo gallery to a single still frame. The moment Mercer's flashlight flared against her lens, she deleted it. The evidence had served its purpose. The legacy would stand on its own. As she slipped her phone into her pocket and joined the boarding line, she felt lighter. Not triumphant, not righteous. Just assured that sometimes taking the quieter stand carries the longest echo. This story gives us lesson that one stop, one voice, one choice to stand firm instead of staying silent. Lieutenant Colonel Wallace didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard. Because real power isn't how loud you speak, it's how clearly you lead. And accountability? That's how change begins. Hit the subscribe button for more interesting videos. Keep staying with Black Echoes Global.